all fears are just one fear, that you wouldn't be able to handle it. We don't fear losing our job. We don't fear losing our health. We don't fear getting shut down again. We don't actually fear those things. We fear that.
Hi guys, welcome to the show where we talk to the people who have followed their passion to achieve great success and are impacting many lives. If you're new here, then please do consider subscribing to my channel by hitting on subscribe button, and don't forget to tap on the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future videos. This episode is being recorded in association with Let's Localize, an organization with a mission to foster the micro contributions from communities and businesses to schools to support for their needs of time, skill, and funding. I'm your host, Ajay Mathur, and my guest today is a speaker, coach, and an entrepreneur. She is the founder and CEO of Flourishing Center, a New York City-based benefit corporation with a mission to improve the happiness and well-being of community and individuals. She's also a creator of many models, certifications, and programs. She's done masters in positive psychology from University of Pennsylvania, and she's also doing PhD in mind-body medicine. Please welcome the person who was once a party entertainer, but now on a mission to uplift human condition by empowering people with tools and skills to achieve great happiness, Emiliya Zhivotovskaya. Emiliya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Great to be here.
We will be talking a lot about the positive psychology today. And before I get into something, let me ask you, what is positive psychology?
Yeah, it's a field that was started in 1998 by a psychologist and a group of psychologists that were asking the question, how do we build what's right in the world and what's right with people? And the reason for this question is because traditional psychology had focused a lot on how do we fix what's wrong. So it studied a lot of things like dis-ease and disorder and dysfunction. And while it's important to be able to look for treatments to support people on things like anxiety and depression, they realized that psychologists hadn't really used the scientific method to understand or study the conditions that enable people to not just get out of the negative to baseline, but go into the positive elements of their life, to go north of neutral. So in 1998, a group of psychologists came together and said this should be its own field of study, that we should actually ask questions like, what leads to happiness? What leads to fulfillment? What separates happy people from unhappy people? How do we build life satisfaction? How do we understand meaning in life and positive emotions, not just negative emotions? And so this field was started to try to give more scientific validity to the types of themes that people might read about in a self-help book, or might have heard from wisdom from their grandparents or from their parents, or and actually say, let's use the scientific method to try to identify those factors and test those factors and create theories and interventions that could help people thrive and become healthier and build their well-being.
So this is about actually promoting the positive functions rather than treating the miseries, mental issues, right? So that's quite interesting. And I am actually very new to this. I recently came to know that there is such term called positive psychology. And when I read about it and realized that it's only 2 decades old. So my question to you then is, what actually inspired you to get into that? And actually, you've gone and done masters in this subject, which was so fairly new. So I just want to know, what is your inspiration to do that?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, my first career started in a bit of an untraditional path, and also at an untraditional age. So I actually started working when I was 14, and I look at many people who are 14 these days, and I just sort of think to myself, wow, like I had so much responsibility when I was their age. It's kind of baffling. But at the time, I was very quick to grow up, and I was so excited that I got to have this really amazing job opportunity, which was I entertained birthday parties for a living. I started working as a DJ dancer and then as a kids' birthday party entertainer. And so I got to make people happy for an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours at their christenings, at their bar mitzvahs, at their block parties, at their birthday parties. And it was a really, really phenomenal career that I loved so much. And I feel like that really gave me both a lot of skill, but also a lot of tenacity. It was the type of thing where I knew that I had many opportunities to just build this confidence in being in front of people, being in front of a crowd, thinking on my feet, and then also using a lot of my strengths. So I'm someone who brings a lot of zest into the world, and I have a lot of energy and a lot of joy, and I just love that I could make people happy, and then I could be there with them and think of these experiences for them and play games with the kids and figure out how to get kids playing with their parents, and just got to be really creative. But then I also had this really great job, and the thought of taking on a career that I would just, either dislike or hate, it was sort of the way that I saw what adults were doing in the world. And when I thought about taking on a career, I already had a really fruitful job, and I was really blessed that I got to be influenced by some really amazing mentors when I was in my college years. And I got to really trust that I wanted to study with people that were passionate about what it is that they were doing. So in college, I'd look to take classes that if anybody said that, like, if the class was of interest to me, or if the people said that the teachers were really passionate about what they were teaching, I was all for it. I would take classes in just about anything because I really knew that it was the quality, the love and the passion that the teacher put into it that really drove them. And so in doing that, I met an amazing mentor. His name was Dr. Srikumar Rao, and he was both a marketing professor, but he also taught a course that I then had to petition the school to offer again, because it had been a while since they had offered the course, and it was called Creativity and Personal Mastery. And the course was basically a course that taught some positive psychology concepts, that taught some self-help concepts, and taught some spiritual concepts as well. And a lot of it was about teaching about the power of the mind and the power of creating our own reality. And he put it in my head that, not only can we create meaningful work in the world, that there's this actual way of being that you could actually create your ideal job, a job that you would do, that you would love so much that you would actually pay for the honor of doing it, and just be grateful that it was the other way around, that you actually got paid to do it. And when I heard that, something about it felt so right to me, that if I was going to dedicate my life to my work, that I wanted to do something that was going to be um, nourishing and was going to be my calling in the world, and that would make the best use of my skills and strengths. And so I wanted to do what he was doing. I wanted to teach the kind of things he was teaching. And then I learned that people actually had careers as motivational speakers. I met someone who was a professional life coach, and I was like, people do that? There's a thing? And I kind of felt like I'm already a life coach. That's what I've kind of been doing my whole life, even though at that point I'd only been on the planet for about 20 years, but I was like, I knew that ever since I was a kid, I was the type of person that my friends would all come to me for advice. I was the person who would always be there to listen, to be there to support them, to offer them different perspectives. And so I knew this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I wanted to be a life coach. And I thought I was going to become a traditional psychologist and sneak happiness in the back door. I thought that I was going to kind of study the types of things that I've been studying in the classroom, but I kind of intuitively felt that just working on the negative side of the human experience, working with neurosis or psychosis or dysfunction, or it felt like it was something I could do, but it wasn't what I was here to do. So I thought I would just get a traditional PhD, study psychology, but kind of not tell them that what I really wanted to do was this happiness work and focusing on helping people grow into the positive side of their experience. And then I was very blessed that I found out that I didn't have to be a sneaky psychologist, and actually the field had existed that had just started a couple of years prior in positive psychology. And there was actually a school that was offering a degree in positive psychology, and I was part of their second graduating class. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied with the founder of the field. And that put me onto this path of both studying and applying positive psychology. And that's the kind of neat and tidy path that I would kind of give you of like my story, which might seem like, oh, it just all kind of aligned itself. But in that story, there was also a tremendous amount on the other side of resilience and a lot of obstacles that I didn't think I would have to face, but started to teach me positive psychology because I was kind of forced into putting it into action.
Mm.
And I'm happy to speak to that too, if you'd like. I'm happy to kind of offer you the other side of it.
Okay, yeah, we'll get into that. But quite interesting to know that you have actually had your coach as the founder of positive psychology. Yes, is that correct?
One of my teachers, yes. I
One of
studied
my
with
teachers, yeah.
Dr. Martin Seligman,
Martin
who started
Seligman.
the field. Yeah.
Mhm. And Dr. Sri Kumar Rao, I've seen his video is quite phenomenal, that guy. Uh, so there's one point that you mentioned about self-help. Now, that brings a question to me that self-help actually is not a scientifically proven kind of techniques like law of attraction and think positive. Well, it's all there, but this is something that is being taught in schools, in colleges, right? So you've done a degree in it. So how is positive psychology different than the normal self-help that is out there and it has a huge market of?
Yeah, well, I love self-help. I love self-help books. I think that they helped me tremendously and were my doorway into this work. But the main difference between self-help and positive psychology is that we like to say that self-help books are often a prescriptive science, meaning or prescriptive base. They're kind of telling people, here's what you should do in order to improve yourself. Positive psychology is a science, and so science is use the empirical method to observe and to test. And so what positive psychology offers that's unique is that the interventions that we talk about are tested. So we'll run experiments. We'll give one exercise to one group of people, another exercise to another group of people, and we'll measure them before, during, and after, and we compare the differences to say, what impact do these types of exercises make on people's lives? We'll do correlational studies to try to understand what's the relationship between, let's say, people who frequently experience gratitude to how they report their happiness and their well-being. We'll also look to understand what are the mechanisms behind how things work, not just what works, but how do they work? So if we're focusing on gratitude, we'll say, what does gratitude do in our brain? What does it do to our body? What does it do to our relationships? Why do the things that work? So positive psychology has an added layer of science to it that traditional so that self-help doesn't always have. That I find that oftentimes self-help will have a great amount of wisdom in it that either people have come to on their own, or let's say it's ancient wisdom that they're kind of retelling, and which is a really wonderful perspective. But I like to say that positive psychology then takes some of that great wisdom that comes from self-help and then says, let's test it. Let's actually test it out, and recognize that it's not a one-size-fits-all model. Certain exercises or interventions that work really well for some people may not work for others. It may work better for certain populations. Maybe you can overdo it. Can you overdo gratitude? Can you overdo optimism? Another big area of positive psychology is we look to study strengths. We look to understand and actually give language for what's right with people, what's right in the world, knowing that we have a tendency to have a lot of words to describe things that we don't do well or things that we want to fix, or in the context of traditional psychology, we have languages and words to describe what happens when things go wrong. And positive psychology looks to offer language for what happens when things go right, and how do we correct for that?
Okay, so let's go a little bit more deep into that. So tell us more about the main elements of the positive psychology and the PERMA model I'm referring to, and also the last sixth element that you have introduced, the vitality one. So tell us about all of those, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So when positive psychology first started, it asked the question, what are the pathways to happiness? If somebody wants to become happier, what do they do? How do they approach increasing their happiness and their well-being? And it started off that the scientists identified 3 pathways or approaches. And then since then, they've added on 2 more. And then I add on a 6th, as you pointed out. And so this acronym is called PERMA-V, PERMA being the first 5, and I add on a V for vitality. And I like to think of this as pathways or approaches to how people can increase their happiness, and that they're all different roads, right? There's not any one road to happiness and greater well-being, but you can enter in at any of these things and you can build them, and they're all intertwined and they go together. So the first one is building your experience of positive emotions, which means on a day-to-day basis, you ask yourself, what am I feeling? And if at the end of the day, I've spent more time in negative emotions than I have in positive emotions, then your overall positivity is low. But we look to say, how do we build our experience of positive emotions so that we're not getting rid of negative emotions, but that we're not getting stuck in our negative emotions, that throughout the day, you might be feeling frustrated or overwhelmed or worried or anxious, but then can you also feel connected and joyful and hopeful and grateful and excited and focused and clear? So that's the first pathway, which is building positivity. The second is engagement, which has to do with how engaged and connected, how present are you to your work and to the world around you? And we can actually do things to build that. The third is relationships. So research shows that investing in the quality of your relationships and connections is one of the most powerful ways to increase your happiness and well-being. So this, we say, how do we not just get more connection in our lives, but also deepen the quality of the connections that we have with people in the world around us? The fourth is meaning. So looking at what are the sources of meaning and purpose in your life? What makes your life meaningful? Do you know your purpose? Do you know that you are here for something bigger than yourself? And what helps you connect to something bigger than yourself? And what gives your life meaning? The fifth is achievement or accomplishment, and this is being able to set goals and achieve the things that you want to achieve in the world and make happen the things that you want to create. And there's actually research on how to do that. There's actually ineffective ways to goal set and actually effective ways to goal set, and so positive psychology aims to study that. And then the final V is for vitality. And this is where we look at the taking care of our well-being, our physical well-being, as its own pathway to flourishing. That in addition to nurturing my emotions and nourishing my relationships and the things that I do in the world, making sure that I take really great care of my body, because when my body is thriving, the other parts of PERMA often fall into place. So this includes everything from sleep and feeding yourself well and moving well and having touch in your life and having connection and having time in nature and all those things that nurture our sense of vitality and energy. And each of these 6 pathways underneath it has concepts that we can learn and theories that we can learn, and understanding ourselves and others, has exercises and invitations that we can, interventions that we can take on to actually build these pathways.
It sounds like some sort of enhancement to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it?
Yeah, many people, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, many people are familiar with it, and they may not even be familiar with the fact that he had an added level to it. So Maslow falls into this very much so. In fact, we actually would say that Maslow was one of the first earliest positive psychologists before positive psychology exists. He was actually attributed to a quote of calling it positive psychology, saying that we know a lot about how we fix shortcomings, but we don't know enough about the positive side of the human condition. Abraham Maslow was actually a humanistic psychologist, and his work in that field, humanistic psychology, we'd like to say is a close cousin of positive psychology. It predated the creation of positive psychology, but one of the big differences between these two fields was how they were going about their research. But the humanists believed that one of the things that should drive us as human beings is this idea of fulfilling yourself, fulfilling your life, living your life at your best. And they did a lot of qualitative research in their explorations to try to understand things like what is meaning and purpose in life, and what does it mean to live self-actualized. But where Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes in so much to positive psychology is that he said that once your basic needs are met, you start going to higher needs. So once your safety needs or your basic physiological needs are met, you go on to safety needs. Once your safety needs are met, you have a need to belong and feel like you're connected to the world around you. Once you have that, it builds your self-esteem needs, your need for yourself. Then at the top, you can build to this thing called like self-actualizing yourself. But the higher level that Maslow had even beyond that is the one that he was working on until he died, which was self-transcendence, which for me is the meaning piece. So it's going beyond yourself, transcending yourself
Yeah,
into
yeah.
something that goes beyond you.
So I'm just thinking of in the current climate, when, say, your part 2 and 3, the relation and the engagement side of
Yeah.
your model, how is it playing at this point in time when everybody is sort of isolated and not having enough connections from the outside world? Is it like people are facing a lot of struggles, or you believe they will bounce back, or what's your thought
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah, I believe that people are facing a tremendous amount of contrast, and sometimes you need to not have this thing present in your life to realize how important it is or how much you miss it. For example, sometimes we take our health for granted until something happens and we get something taken away, hopefully temporary, not permanently. Like I think about, a time I broke my collarbone and I couldn't use my right hand. And oh my gosh, I was so grateful, one, for my left hand. Two, I realized how much I took for granted, how my capacity to get things done and move things around and to use my hand. So I think that people are struggling tremendously right now. I run a program called Better Than Before for a group of individuals, anyone who wants support during this time, because I do have a belief that we can bounce back from this. And one of my resilience programs that I built out is called Bounce Back Better. But with that in mind, I feel that without intervention, if people just sort of go about their life the way that they have before, and if they haven't had the skills for resilience of how to work with their thoughts, with their emotions, with their body, with their relationship to others, they are going to struggle tremendously right now because it is a very difficult time. And that there are skills for resilience that we can actually learn and we can practice and we can get better at. And in doing so, we can inoculate ourselves from some of the aftermath of what this pandemic can bring. We know that there is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. We know that people can become traumatized from some of the things that they're going through and they're facing, and that the uncertainty and the fear can lead to depression. It can lead to drug addiction, alcohol abuse. It can lead to people doing worse as a result of the pandemic. But we also know that that most people actually are resilient, and that most of us will bounce back, and that when we learn the skills for bouncing back, we can bounce back better. We can also grow as a result of this pandemic. And I know a lot of people who are looking to that in a more sustained long-term way, not just people going, oh, I'm quarantined now, this is a great time to learn how to cook or take on a new language, or some of these other things that people initially were like all excited about, and then it was like, wow, this is going on a lot longer than I thought. But there are many people who are using this as a place to pause and stop and to reflect and ask themselves, what are their values? What's important to them? How do they want to be? And valuing relationships and looking for ways to create those meaningful connections. And maybe while we are distanced and while we are limited in how we can operate right now, I believe that as there's a famous quote by Amy Purdy where she says that we grow as a result of our limitations because they're not meant to hold us down, but they can be bouncing off points. So companies that will thrive as a result of this, and people who will continue to thrive, are the ones who are going to use this to work with it and actually push off of those boundaries to create things that maybe didn't exist before, and create a new way of being that might not have existed before.
Can you give us some tools to how to stay positive in tough times? I mean, practical tool that some people can actually use them.
Yeah, absolutely. One is to really look at the importance of self-care, particularly when we're looking at a pandemic that threatens our physical health and well-being. When we feel physically unwell. It leads to our mental conditions. And one of the things that's hardest is that we see a lot of people trying to find pleasure and find self-soothing, and they're quarantined. And so they're not eating as healthy as they might have been, otherwise been, or they're staying inside. They're not exercising as much as they could or should. And most of us know what to do for ourselves in terms of how to care for ourselves. And we just sort of, we slip into things that might just be easier to do when it's not at the forefront of our mind. And in mind body medicine, we say self-care is healthcare. And when we think about how to keep ourselves growing, I think it's so important to just go back to those basics of how can I take exceptional care of my body right now. And then there are a lot of mental tools that we can work with as well. And I think that that second to our physical health, this pandemic is most threatening our sense of safety and security. Most people, never imagined that something like this could happen, that the world could literally come to a standstill over the course of just a few weeks. No one imagined that things could shut down like this. And given that, I think that it offers it brings up a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear of the unknown. And so one of the biggest things people are grappling with right now is what if, what if, what if, what if, and the inability to plan is really difficult for people. The fact that I don't know what I'm going to do 6 months from now, or, when will things open back up, or will my industry return to where it was, or will something happen to me, or will it happen to my family? And so when it comes to uncertainty, the best way to deal with our fears, in addition to using our body to calm ourselves down and say, it's okay, everything's okay, I'm okay, we'll be okay, is to actually use the reminder that all fears boil down to a single fear. And this was written by Susan Jeffers in her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And she says, all fears are just one fear, that you wouldn't be able to handle it. We don't fear losing our job. We don't fear losing our health. We don't fear getting shut down again. We don't actually fear those things. We fear that it would happen and it would destroy us, that we wouldn't be able to carry on. But if you think about the fact that we've always handled anything that have come our way, like you wouldn't be sitting here in front of me, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you if the things that came my way, I didn't always figure out some way to handle it. So one of the tools I give people a lot when they're saying, how do I deal with this debilitating fear or this type of feeling that I'm walking around with in my chest of worry about what the future is going to bring? And I just keep reminding them to tell themselves, I'll handle it, I'll handle it, I'll handle it. Because you can really get caught up in your head. You're like, many people have said this to me, all of a sudden it's like having a hard time breathing. And it's like, do I have COVID or am I having a panic attack? And it's usually that it's the stress of it is actually causing a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear for people. And the third tip that I would give that I think is age-old wisdom that this pandemic is offering us as an opportunity, which is to really truly practice mindfulness. We hear it, mindfulness has become a big buzz in the research because there's a lot of research coming out that mindfulness and meditation makes such an impact on our well-being and our creativity. And Eastern traditions have talked about the power of mindfulness and being in the present moment for thousands of years. And it's not something that we human beings do naturally, because we have this prefrontal cortex, this like outer layer of our brain that's different than dogs and monkeys and elephants and other animals that have less of a prefrontal cortex and a neocortex. So they live much more in the present moment. My cat lives entirely in the present moment. We as humans, we have a greater concept of future and a greater concept of past. And because of that, our brain goes to the future and it goes to the past. But one of the things that I think that the pandemic has forced us all into is to really learn how to be in the moment and how to be in the now, saying, I don't know what 2 weeks from the future, 2 weeks into the future is going to look like, but right here, right now, I'm okay. I'm with a group of people. We are safe. I have my needs met right now. And I can try to think problem solving into the future. I can try to think creatively about what the future has in store for me. However, I can't stay in the future, and I can't I can honor and grieve the past. We all wish we can go back to times when things were just open and we could just fly anywhere and go anywhere and meet with anyone anywhere at any time.
Mm.
But right now, all we have is the present.
Yeah, and I think you've touched upon a very interesting thing about your cat living in present moment. And there are one more type of people who always live in present moment, and those are kids, right?
Yes.
And in one of the paper about positive psychology I was reading, and it was written that they gave instructions. They trained some of the teachers about positive psychology, and then they found that the children who are being taught by those teachers had less issues with bad behavior, anxiety, and depression. So definitely it has a lot of value in it. I would like to know, how would you teach all of these things to children who probably wouldn't know a lot of jargon?
Yeah, well, we do teach it to children. I run a certification program alongside with my colleague Rini Jain, who creates a ton of programming for positive psychology for children
Mm,
that both parents use and also educators use. And so you're absolutely right. Children live much more in the present moment than we do. And part of the reason is because their neocortex is still largely under development and it continues to develop until they are in their early 20s,
mm,
which can lead to lots of different changes. But yes, children are much more creative. They have much less inhibition. They're less self-conscious of themselves when they're younger. Then all of a sudden, the self-consciousness kicks in as we get older. And part of it is because we gain the ability to reason, we gain executive functioning, but we also want to learn how to be in control of that executive functioning so our worries don't get the best of us. For kids, the most important thing we can teach them right now is how to work with their feelings and how to feel their feelings in a
mm,
way that doesn't numb them, that doesn't squash them, that really helps children honor what they're feeling and to help them understand that feelings aren't scary. Feelings are normal and they're natural, and we want to learn to work with them. So, when it comes to things like worry, which we do have a lot more children experiencing anxiety at earlier ages than they've ever had before,
yeah.
and the pandemic has accelerated that for a lot of people as well. And so the question is, how do we help them stress and stress better? And there's lots of tools that are available that my colleague has created on gozen.com, and that's a great resource for parents and for teachers to learn positive psychology skills for children. There's workbooks and animations that children can watch, and teachers that are interested in actually applying this and bringing this into the classroom, because I think what we're also seeing is the weaknesses of our school systems, just trying to
Mm,
focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic and science and history and all those basic things that school teaches. When this pandemic hit, we really realized that we don't have children equipped for how to deal with the stresses of day-to-day life, and that we need to focus on emotional intelligence and well-being skills and life skills that can not just help children cope with the stress of the pandemic, but that can also support them as they get older. And so
mm,
these skills exist, but I think the most important one is really on how to know that it's okay to feel what they're feeling and that they can express and experience their feelings without getting stuck in them. And then teach them how to also understand that they can create emotion. So oftentimes it just feels like feelings just happen to us, but oftentimes our feelings are connected to what we're thinking about. So if I'm thinking about something bad happening, I'm going to have worry. If I'm thinking about things that I used to have that I don't have anymore, I'm going to feel sad. But I can also learn how to add in emotions, how I can create my own gratitude, how I can create my own inspiration, my own hopefulness. And
mm.
then emotions don't just happen. I can really work with them to create the kind of things I want to experience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the great tips. I think they're super useful for the parents. Could you tell me the name of the site again? What goes in?
Yeah,
What
it's
did you
called
say?
gozen.com. And
Goes in.
if you're interested in the program for teachers, it's the Center for Positive Education.com.
Okay, okay. I was reading about the Vision 51 from Martin Seligman, and he was saying that by 2051, 51% of people will be flourishing. I wanted to know what are the initiatives in that direction and how is that going on at the moment? Because this vision was like 10 years ago. Where are we
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah, hopefully a pandemic didn't put a wrench in it, in the sense that we know that people's well-beings are tremendously impacted. I think that so to backtrack, Martin Seligman had a call to action to both psychologists and to practitioners and researchers and politicians and policymakers, and businesses and schools, and basically asked the question that what if by 2051 we could have 51% of the population flourishing? Right now, we average about 16, 17-ish percent of
Ooh,
the population flourishing. And
incredible.
then, and flourishing is thriving, right? That's a place where you say that most of the conditions in my life are the way I want them to be. I'm happy, I'm fulfilled, I'm highly satisfied with my life.
Mm,
Most people are kind of in between. And it's sort of often answered by the question when you say, "Oh, how are you?" Most people go, "I'm good.
fine.
I'm fine." Right? Most of us are. Most of
Yeah,
us are. We're good. We're fine. And
yeah.
so the question is like, well, what if that wasn't the case? What if most of us were
Mhm.
actually in a state of flourishing? And the initiatives have to do with the number of education programs that exist out there in positive psychology. I run a certification program for people who want to learn these skills and create a profession out of positive psychology and use it in that way.
Mhm.
And there's a tremendous amount of research that comes out. So there's journals and um, that are dedicated to the research and publications in positive psychology, and books being created and initiatives being created in businesses taking on what does it mean to create positive organizational cultures, and schools asking the question, how do we apply these skills and teach them to children? We see policymakers starting to move towards not just measuring the gross domestic product of their countries, but going
Mm,
on to ask the question of how do we measure well-being and
yeah,
happiness levels of our people, and actually make what we measure aligned with what we value, and how do we value well-being.
mm,
There's tons of, every month I hear about new apps being created and new books being published and new courses being created, and some of it is coming from my own students, which it makes me so excited about the things that they're doing in spreading this work. So I think a lot is happening in a lot of different ways, but we talk about the three best applications of positive psychology in terms of a profession. Obviously, people can integrate the science into anything that they do, but we like to say that the best application of positive psychology is either through coaching, teaching, or consulting. Those are natural careers in the field. And so more and more people working with people on an individual basis, doing this work, teaching them, helping them achieve, set and move towards their goals, people creating educational experiences, whether it be through podcasts like this one, or blogs, or writing, or workshops, or online courses and webinars. And then consulting. This is when I train people to come into organizations, whether it's schools or businesses, and actually execute programming in positive psychology. So a lot happening all over the world, but there's a lot of need and a lot of work to be done. And I don't know where we stand now in the stats, but I'm optimistic that we will get there. And my hope is that it's like the hockey stick effect, where it's a slow build and it's slow build and it's slow build, and that we're still in that slow build place. But then at some point, things
yeah,
keep multiplying, and then you hit this critical mass that all it needs is for like every person who knows about these skills and tools to just
yeah.
tell three other people, and then it just shoots up and it explodes. And I hope that that will be the case, knowing that it's not just about building the positive, but it's also learning how to be more resilient and work with the negative. And so we need these skills out there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the fastest growing area of psychology, just 2 decades old, and quite a lot of information available already
Yeah.
on internet. So yeah, that's great. So you have started very young, and you've now trained around thousands of people in this positive psychology and resilience and many other positive stuff that you teach. Your courses are being learned in the US and worldwide online. What next?
What next for me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just continuing to do it all more effectively, more efficiently on a bigger scale. I would like to say that we want to be the Zumba of the positive psychology industry, where Zumba makes it just so easy and so joyful for anybody that is passionate about fitness and dance and well-being to actually create sustainable careers for themselves. And so that's what we try to do here at the Flourishing Center, to take anybody who's passionate about helping and wants to make an impact in the world, and to give them the training, the knowledge, the skills, the community, and the tools to just make it plug and play, that they can go out and make a difference in the world, and also do so in a way that many people will turn to this as their career, that it doesn't just have to be a side thing that they do, that they can actually turn this into meaningful work in the world.
Thank you very much. So finally, how can people contact you?
Yeah, check us out at theflourishingcenter.com. We have a ton of free offerings on there, including some great questionnaires you can take if you're sort of thinking about positive psychology and thinking about what type of work might be aligned with who you are. We have a change agent questionnaire to find out what type of change agent you are. And if you find out the type that you are, you get a free report that navigates you through what some next steps you can take to build a career out of this work. We have a resilience questionnaire on there, free online courses in what is positive psychology, what is the science of resilience. I mentioned this daily program that I'm running. It's a $30 for 30 days program where I do a daily class, and it also includes the online version of my Bounce Back Better class. So you get $300 worth of courses, something we're doing just for COVID-19 to, again, support people so that they have the skills to handle this. So lots of yummy things on the website, including our podcast, and feel free to check us out there.
All right. Thank you very much, Emiliya. It was wonderful talking to you, and I learned a lot about positive psychology. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure. Thanks everyone for watching.
So guys, if you want to know more about positive psychology, it is definitely a fascinating subject, and you would all need it. We all need it at some point in our lives. Please do check on internet and on the website of Emiliya, the Flourishing Center. It's got quite a lot of free stuff that she has just told. I'll put all the links down there. And if you have not yet done so, then please do consider subscribing to my channel by hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to tap on the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future video. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.